This is K Squid Radio, and I have Angel on the line. Angel is one of the people that's involved, Angel Garcia, with the Californians for Pesticide Reform, and they are suing the state of California to get them to stop applying this particular pesticide. Hi, Angel. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So tell us more about this lawsuit.
Absolutely. So I just want to start off by saying, it's hard not to feel frustrated when we look at what's happening in agricultural communities in California. So nearly a decade after community members first took the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, or also known as DPR, to the court over its handling of this cancer-causing fumigant known as 1,3-dichloropropene, or just simply known as 1,3-D, we are finding ourselves back in the courts. This past Monday, February 2nd, residents Rocio Ortiz, Ana Barrera joined forces with us at Californians for Pesticide Reform, along with the Pesticide Action and Agroecology Network, to file yet another lawsuit. So our message is clear. DPR's latest attempt at regulating 1,3-D just simply isn't good enough. So this new lawsuit, Rachel, calls out DPR for violating basic requirements of the Administrative Procedure Act by issuing regulations that are anything but clear or consistent. And even worse, these rules break California's own food and ag code by letting people get exposed to dangerous pesticide emissions, levels that can actually harm human health.
Tell me more about what this pesticide does, and is it applied in the fields around us here in the Monterey Bay?
It surely is. So quick history on the pesticide. So we're talking about a highly toxic liquid fumigant with a strong odor. And it kills most, if not all, living organisms in the soil. And to apply this stuff, pesticide applicators literally inject it into the soil as a liquid where it rapidly converts into gas to kill all the living things in the soil. But here's the thing. As 1,3-D changes from liquid to gas, it doesn't just stay put underground. It can escape from the soil and can drift into the surrounding air. So what this means is that not only does it do its job beneath the surface, but as a gas, it can travel from application sites right into nearby fields and even residential neighborhoods.
It sounds like a pretty bad thing. And when it does enter the human body, what are some of the damages that it does when it gets there? Is it ingested through the lungs or skin or both?
Yes, so this chemical can bring both acute reactions and what to us is also much more alarming, the long-term impact. When it comes to the immediate human body reactions when coming into contact with this chemical, we're talking about respiratory problems, skin irritation, blurry vision are some of the more common symptoms. But then when we talk about sort of the long-term impact, we're talking about cancer. We're talking about stomach cancer, esophagus. We're talking about just a whole array of different types of cancer that this particular chemical is strongly linked to. It's so toxic that even countries have banned it altogether. I think we looked briefly at some of the numbers, and we're looking at upwards of 31 countries at least that have banned this chemical altogether because of this highly toxic nature.
Now, I had asked if you know whether this is widely applied in the fields around Monterey County and Santa Cruz County. We mostly grow things like strawberries, Brussels sprouts, lettuce, and other greens, artichokes.
Absolutely. So, according to DPR's own data, Monterey County actually ranks second when it comes to applications of this particular chemical. So it's in the ballpark of upwards of 800,000 pounds of this stuff that was used back in 2023. We're still waiting for the latest figures to come out on more recent data, but that's the most recent data that we had available. And then also when it comes to Santa Cruz, the use in Santa Cruz comes around 255,000 pounds of this stuff that was used. It certainly ranks in the top end of counties when it comes to 1,3-D use in the area.
That's certainly not a contest you want to win, according to what you're saying and what it does to the human body. Are the people that are most impacted people working in the fields or people living near them as well?
Yeah, I think, the situation with T-Lone is that because it's a highly toxic fumigant, it really poses major concern for communities. So just real quick, this stuff was actually first registered in California in 1970, and then it was actually banned in the 1990s. And back when we fast forward to 1990, it was banned for a period of time because of alarming high concentrations of it detected in air monitoring station in Merced County. And then here's where it gets frustrating. Just 5 years later, 1995, DPR reintroduced the use of 1,3-D in California, despite the earlier concerns about public health and environmental safety. So to us, there's a long history of sort of trying to understand why it is that that DPR in the state are fighting so hard to keep its use in place.
Do you have any theories on why that might be? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. So, I think that, for one, 1,3-D is one of the top pesticides mostly used in California. I think it ranks upwards of top 3, if that. So it's one that's certainly highly ranked. And the other piece to that is that it is a pre-plant pesticide. So this is a chemical that is it used to sort of prep the land, as we hear some locals talk about it. It's literally to just kill everything in the soil to sort of get it ready for the next conventional crop that will take place. But I think that for us, it's like the story behind this particular chemical is very concerning. Given that at one point the state acknowledged that it was indeed dangerous and they put a pause on its use, but then they sort of reinstated it. So we can only say that, if we follow the history, there's maybe some deductions that we can only deduce certain things. But for example, the Department of Pesticide Regulation, when it was reintroduced in 95, there was hope that stricter regulations would protect communities. And so what the department did was they put various mitigation measures in place. And in the years that followed, the department, the DPR, quietly modified these protections through negotiations with Dow, the manufacturer of 1,3-D. And then, shockingly, this back and forth happened without any public notice or opportunities for public comment. So what did this happen, or what did this lead to? In 2002, there was this thing called the California Management Plan 1,3-D, and it's a document that was shaped more by private discussions than public health priorities. And this plan gave Dow the green light to restructure how it managed the use of this particular chemical in California. And what this led to was a system that capped annual applications at a hefty 90,250 adjusted total pounds per township. And this is a number to keep cancer risk below a certain threshold. But here's where it gets more troubling. Under the so-called township cap program, where it sort of puts a ceiling to how much they can use, if a local county agricultural commissioner permitted less than that 90,250 cap in any given year, they could simply roll over the unused amounts for future years. So think of it as at one point, rollover minutes was a thing.
Right.
It was similar to that.
Wow, that's really amazing. And I just want to insert this, and there's no scientific backing to what I'm going to say, but our county agriculture commissioner died of cancer. He was the one out there every day walking through the fields. I'm not going to say that one thing led to the other, but I thought it was very sad that the person, who's supposed to be protecting us himself possibly became a victim of the very pesticides he was supposed to be protecting us from. So sadly, that's what happened. That's not the current. Obviously, we have a new one now, but I met him and then found out, that he had cancer and passed away. That was back in 2010 or 11, I think. So I don't know if you knew that, but just another little bit of data.
And these are cases that we hear often when we are out with community in Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, and also in various counties in the San Joaquin Valley where this chemical is also heavily used. It feels like we hear a lot of overlap in terms of the experiences and how they and how this the emergence of cancer also takes place. And for us, again, this lawsuit is just an ongoing fight because we feel strongly that DPR needs to do their job. They need to go back and they really need to do a better job at drafting or making a rule that would protect the community from 1,3-D. Because what they have right now is just simply confusing. They have two regulations, and they're trying. It's just really hard to follow because on the one hand you have a regulation that applies to residents, and on the other you have a regulation that applies to workers that are working nearby where 1,3-D is applied. And that second rule, the one that applies to workers, is even very limited in scope. In fact, its premise or it sort of assumes that work hours start at 8 a.m. and end at 4 p.m. And so we actually were part of a study that UC Merced conducted, and it would involve hundreds of interviews with farm workers. And one of the questions in those interviews was work hours. And what we found was that a lot of them did not, let's just simply put it, that a lot of them did not start their work hour at 8 a.m. and end at 4 p.m., which is what this more recent 1,3-D rule assumes to be.
And let me ask you why that was important to know their work hours. Was that when they were assumed to be exposed? Like most of them probably started at 5 or 6, right, and worked past 4. So tell me about the connection between the work hours being off and the worries about exposure.
Yeah, well, it's for us. So what this means is that basically different people, sometimes living or working just feet apart, are being given different levels of protection from exactly the same toxic chemical that that community members are also exposed to. So it's confusing at best. But what's happening for us here is that the instead of what we are witnessing are two conflicting regulations for 1,3-D. One for residential bystanders living near pesticide applications, and that one went into effect, by the way, in 2024, and it used an air level target of 0.56 parts per billion per day over a lifetime. While the other one, which is the more recent one, that's the occupational bystander, that is workers nearby. It uses a much lower threshold of 0.21 parts per billion per week starting this year, January of this year. So essentially what it boils down to, or another way to look at it is farm worker those that are working nearby where this stuff is applied from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. have a much better protection than those that are not working nearby and that happen to live in nearby or neighboring communities. So that to us is like, what? What is going on here?
Does that include schools? Because I know there's a big group in Watsonville called Safe Ag, Safe Schools that's trying to get laws passed to have bigger buffers around schools.
Yes, and so this our lawsuit pertains to 1,3-D in particular, but the schools do have also something of a protection, that quarter-mile buffer zone that is in place from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and also includes daycare centers. But for us, yes, I mean, I think that buffer zone is in place for this. It also includes 1,3-D, given that this 1,3-D is a drift-prone chemical. And I think that the language in the buffer zone protection around schools and daycare centers does outline that for drift-prone applications, and this would be a drift-prone application.
Let me reintroduce you if people are just tuning in. I'm speaking with Angel Garcia. He is with the Californians for Pesticide Reform, which has launched a lawsuit against the state of California for their confusing regulations. Now, I wanted to ask you if what you'd really like is for them to ban this pesticide like they did in the 90s, and then they brought it back. Is that something that's a longer-term goal? This lawsuit doesn't really ask for that, right?
I mean, I think that for us right now, what we want is we want the state to take action, and state meaning the Department of Pesticide Regulation. We want them to take swift action in protecting people. And a ban certainly would be the most bold type of leadership that can happen in this particular scenario. However, for us, we want to make sure that we're also moving the department to take faster, to act faster on this particular confusing, inconsistent regulation. But a ban is certainly what Californians deserve, a ban of this cancer-causing fumigant.
And it seems like you're up against not only Dow Chemical, one of the biggest chemical companies in the world, but you're also against what people assume is the California government, which was supposed to be very environmental. It doesn't sound like your experience with the state regulators is particularly progressive when it comes to regulating deadly pesticides. Is that fair to say?
It is it is an accurate description of our experience with pesticide regulation in California. You know, often we will hear, well, we have the most regulations in the nation. Well, yeah, because we use the most chemicals in the nation. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily mean that we have the most robust protections. It just means that we just have more rules in place because of the plethora of and the vast number of different pesticides used in agricultural farms.
I was pretty surprised when you told me the pounds that are applied to the fields around here. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds. Is that like wet pounds or dry pounds? I guess it doesn't really matter when you're talking hundreds of thousands. Can you repeat some of those numbers that we heard earlier? Because I thought I might have misheard you.
Yes, no, certainly. For Monterey County, according to state data, the 1,3-D use comes at 839,000 pounds of 1,3-D that's been applied. Santa Cruz comes in at 255,000 pounds of this stuff used.
Is that like in all time or just in a year?
In a year.
Wow.
And this is for 2023, by the way.
I can't even picture like how much space that would take up. That's almost 1 million pounds of pesticides you're talking about.
Exactly. And to also on that thread of like to conceptualize, the magnitude of how much of this stuff are we using. This if we were to aggregate all the pesticide use, it was used on 43,000 acres of farmland in California alone. And to put that into perspective, that's roughly the size of Washington, D.C. 43,000 acres is roughly equates to, I want to say, 70. If my memory doesn't fail me, but it roughly equates to the size of Washington, D.C. in terms of like how much of land this was applied on.
That's even hard to picture in your mind. Angel Garcia, I was wondering also, we often hear, well, it's only, quote, only the farm workers who are getting exposed, but the public, when they buy their vegetables, are fine. They shouldn't worry. All they have to do is wash, their vegetables and they're fine. Is that your understanding as well? I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds of these toxic chemicals being put on our food, and so we're supposed to believe that it's all safe.
Yeah. In the case of 1,3-D, since it is a pre-plant chemical, so, it's not a chemical that will be on the produce itself, but I think it would be fair to say that it is a chemical that comes into contact with the food when as it's growing, and I'm sure that that certainly has an impact on the human body once it's consumed.
Yeah.
But yeah, just for and for the radio listeners and everyone else, this is a pre-plant chemical, so it is it's one that sort of volatilizes once injected into the soil, and if driving on the Central Coast, there oftentimes we can see tarps over strawberry fields. That might be because they've applied or it's been treated with some fumigant. It might be 1,3-D, and so they because of the weather conditions, they are required to put tarps over it. Now, if we go to the San Joaquin Valley, talking about Fresno, Kern, that whole area, they're not necessarily required to put tarps when they apply this stuff because of different weather conditions. It's not as windy as the Central Coast, but that's another element to this chemical.
Well, consumers have power. I mean, we could decide not to buy so-called conventional vegetables that we're worried about as a statement, but also for our health. I wanted to point listeners, we have about 5 more minutes, so I wanted to bring this up. I'm sure you are familiar with the Chamaco study of children's health, which found children living near agricultural fields are much higher rates of cancer. Can you talk about what that revealed? It was a good bit of science, probably the biggest study of its kind.
Yes, the Chamaco study is like one of the premier studies on longitudinal impacts, like the long-term impacts that pesticides have on people, and it really just it reconfirms what we've been hearing from community members, particularly farm worker communities, where they share with us that as they enter later stages in their lives, they start showing symptoms of similar illnesses. We've been to small communities in the San Joaquin Valley where, within a decade, like a whole street eventually developed a similar cancer. So, we have heard stories like these in the past where communities have shared concerns over use of pesticides and the impact that they may have, not just short-term, but more shockingly, long-term impact. And what comes to mind is that, these studies, like the Chamaco studies, and, there's another study that came out recently, the cumulative impact out of UCLA. These studies really they corroborate the lived experience of community. And I think that we are at a point where time and space is really shaping the way that we're able to channel important health information and also important important opportunities to make sure that the state is doing its job. And, we're talking about social media, we're talking about just the use of the internet and just these different platforms that we have now that offer opportunity to sort of relay that in sort of a much faster turnaround than before. And I think that, just the fact that people are now connecting and starting to really branch out and within CPR. We are after all, a coalition of over 200 organizations, and so we're a vast network of community groups and ally organizations, and so we're constantly making these connections around, on the issue of pesticides. And so for us, we definitely want to let the audience know that you're not alone. If you're feeling these symptoms, if you are thinking that, maybe the environment has something to do with your respective illness, it might not be too far off. And for that, there is a local group or a local organization that can certainly connect you. But if not, we also would definitely welcome anyone that wants to be part of the CPR network.
Why don't you give out your contact so in case people want to get involved with Californians for Pesticide Reform, they can do so. Join your mailing list, keep informed.
Absolutely. So one of the first things can be if, just a regular website page is www.pesticidereform.org. And then my email is Angel, ANGEL, @pesticidereform.org. And then you can also hit us up on Facebook and search us under that name, Californians for Pesticide Reform. And those are some of the ways of getting a hold of us, and we can certainly do our best to connect you to your local group.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us here on Talk of the Bay. It's been really interesting talking to you, and best of luck in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
All right. That was Angel Garcia with the Californians for Pesticide Reform. right here on Talk of the Bay. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. Thank you for joining me. First Person Singular is up next, and that's followed by Ask Dr. Dawn. Thank you so much for tuning into K-Squid. We are your community radio station for the Monterey Bay area. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. I'll see you next.